Welcome to the Municipality of Anchorage Platting Board meeting for Wednesday, August the 3rd, 2011. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Lendell Story.
Here.
Steve Abel.
Here.
Ken Fuller.
Here.
Ellen McKay.
Here.
Anastasia Taylor.
Here.
Jody Moses.
Here.
Daniel Young.
Present.
Brent Cole. Amy McKenzie.
Here. We have a full board tonight, so there is definitely a quorum. The next order of business is approval of action summaries. We have action summaries for Monday, June 27th, 2011, Monday, July 4th, 2011, and Wednesday, July 6th, 2011. May I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Young, is there a second? Mr. Fuller, is there any objection to approval of the action summaries? Seeing none, the action summaries are approved. Next order of business is approval of minutes. We don't have any minutes to approve for this meeting. Next order of business is the special order of business disclosures. Are there any disclosures this evening? Seeing none, nothing on the consent agenda, nothing under old business, which brings us to the new business portion of the meeting, public hearings. And during this portion of the meeting, we'll follow the procedure that's printed on the front of the agenda. After the staff presentation, the public hearing will be opened, and the first person to testify will be the petitioner and or his representative, and they will have 10 minutes. Then representative of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc., which will have 5 minutes, and then individuals, which will have 3 minutes. And we keep time with this little timer up here at the front, and it has a green light when you're testifying. When you have 1 minute left, the light turns yellow, and when your time is up, the light will turn red, and you need to sum up if you haven't by that point. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the board, so please remain at the podium. And any individual can have appeal rights relating to any action that the board takes, and the procedure is outlined on the front of the agenda. So with that, we'll move to the first case, which is case S11877-2, Romig Park Subdivision. May we have staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request to approve a variance from AMC 2180-010 street dedication from the requirement to dedicate an additional 10 feet of right-of-way for the west half of Hillcrest Place and the north half of Anton Way, which is required to meet the minimum 60-foot right-of-way width standard for urban local streets under AMC 2185 Table A. On July 12th, 2011, 162 public notice hearings were mailed to the surrounding property owners within 600 feet of the subject property. At this time, 6 comments were received, including one that was added to the packet and laid on the table this evening. 2 comments supported it, 2 opposed it, and 2 were just requesting additional information. On June 6, 2011, a preliminary short plat to eliminate an interior lot line and combine lots 9 and 10 were approved. A condition of approval was to dedicate an additional 10 feet along Hillcrest Place and Anton Way per AMC 2180-010. This property is zoned R2M, multifamily residential, and there is currently a single-family house on the property. The surrounding property is also zoned R2M, and the existing uses are single-family and duplex. This property was originally platted in 1951, and a 40-foot right-of-way was dedicated at that time for both of the streets we're discussing. The road is currently developed to a 33-foot urban secondary street standard without sidewalks. The street has adequately served the surrounding area for 60 years. Acquiring additional right-of-way width for just this lot will not provide much benefit to the subdivision nor the municipality. It is unlikely that the municipality will acquire the necessary right-of-way along the entire street to bring it up to municipal standard, And in addition, dedicating additional right-of-way will result in a non-conforming structure for the applicant. The department finds that all 4 standards have been met as are described in the report, and recommend approval of the variance from AMC 2180-010 from the requirement to dedicate 10 feet of right-of-way along Hillcrest Place and Anton Way.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and could we hear from the petitioner, please?
Good evening, Madam Chair and board members. I don't have much to say. It's been a grueling. My name is Paul Steele. I am trustee for the Family Trust. The staff has done a good job. I have talked to. There's 10 houses on that particular street. I've talked to 8 of those people, and they have told me that they think it's a ridiculous requirement to. For me to have to give 10 feet to join those lots. I appreciate the staff work, and I encourage folks to grant the variance consistent with staff recommendations. And I'll take any questions if anybody has anything.
You have 9 minutes and 30 seconds left for rebuttal at the end of the public testimony. Are there any questions of Mr. Steele?
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify in case S11877-2 Roaming Park subdivision? Anyone at all? Mr. Steele, do you wish to use any of your rebuttal time? He indicates not. So with that, we'll close the public hearing, and the matter rests with the board. Are there any questions of staff? Okay, seeing none, may I have a positive motion, please? Ms. Taylor.
In the matter of case S11877-2, Roaming Park Subdivision, Lot 9A, I motion for the approval of the variance from AMC 2180-010, street dedication for the requirement to dedicate 10 feet of right-of-way along Hillcrest Place and Anton Way.
Is there a second? Mr. Fuller seconds. And Ms. Taylor, would you speak to your motion, please?
Based on the information presented by staff and the petitioner, I think it's a reasonable subdivision, and I support it.
Any other discussion? Any other comments? Mr. Young.
Excuse me. I intend to support this motion also. I wanted to include some findings that in the staff packet on page 5, one of the criteria that we need to address is there are special circumstances or conditions affecting the property that the strict application of the provisions of the subdivision regulations would clearly be impractical, unreasonable, and undesirable to the general public. And I agree with staff's findings that the standard appears to have been met. Hill Place and Anton Way were dedicated with 40-foot right-of-ways with the recording of Plat P 118A on May 11th, 1951 for Roaming Park subdivision. At that time, the property was unincorporated and there were no legal platting regulations. The street has adequately served the surrounding area for 60 years. The second finding is that we need to find is the granting of specific variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area in which said property is situated. The standard appears to be met on this. The road is currently developed to a 33-foot urban secondary street standard without sidewalks. The property is located in an established neighborhood of single-family and duplex uses. It is unlikely that redevelopment of this area will occur and increase the density. Traffic engineering, private development, and right-of-way do not object to this variance. And I'd like to add that this traffic was brought up in some of the public comments, and the findings here are that traffic will not increase. There will not be an increase. And number 3, such variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations or comprehensive plan of the municipality. And that standard appears to have been met. The purpose of the dedicated right-of-way is to provide for existing and future needs for streets, access for fire and emergency response vehicles, on-street parking, drainage improvements, and the location of utilities. These purposes are currently being met by the 40-foot right-of-way. Acquiring additional right-of-way width for just this lot will not provide much benefit to the subdivision nor the municipality. It is unlikely that the municipality will acquire the necessary right-of-way along the entire street to bring it up to current municipal standards. And lastly, the undue hardship would result from strict compliance with specific provisions or requirements of the subdivision regulations, and the standard appears to be met. Providing additional right-of-way will result in non-conforming structure. The house is currently located 26.2 feet from Hillcrest. The front yard setback is in the R2M district, or encroachment, while it would be considered a legally non-conforming structure should there be a fire or other damage to the property of more than 50% of the replacement cost. The structure would have to be built in conformity with Title 21. And for those reasons and findings, I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the variance is granted. The next case is case S11878-2, Northwood Park subdivision. May we have the staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a request for variance from AMC 2180-300D lot width to depth ratio for the south half of Lot 9 and Lot 10, Northwood Park subdivision. The preliminary plat was approved for proposed Lot 10A, Northwood Park subdivision on June 6, 2011, under short plat case S11878-1. During the review process, it was discovered that a variance from AMC 2180-300D was required in order to record the final plat. The petitioner is replatting these two lots in an effort to obtain a building permit and remodel the existing legally non-conforming single-family structure. Presently, the house straddles the property line between south half Lot 9 and Lot 10. I would like to address the variance request. The variance request is from 2180-300D. There are 4 standards for approval of a variance. I'd like to address each individually. Standard number 1, staff finds that this standard is met. The original subdivision of lots 9 and 10 were created in 1953 prior to the subdivision regulations. The south half of Lot 9 was created by warranty deed in 1955. These subdivisions were done prior to the subdivision regulations. The petitioner seeks to replat the lots by removing the interior lot lines separating the two lots and thus reducing the nonconformity and moving the property in the direction of conformity with current municipal regulation. Standard number 2, staff finds this standard to be met. Granting of this variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other property in the area. As in standard number 1, granting of this variance moves the property in a direction of conformity. Standard number 3, staff finds this standard to be met. Granting of this variance will not have the effect of nullifying the intent and purpose of the subdivision regulations. Granting this variance will move the property closer to conformance with current subdivision regulations, and replatting to remove the interior lot line will resolve the building setback issues. Standard number 4, staff finds this standard to be met. Undue hardship would result from the strict compliance with specific provisions of Anchorage Municipal Code. Currently, the lot width to depth ratio is 5:1. Granting this variance will reduce the nonconformity, allow the petitioner to complete the replat process and remodel the existing nonconforming structure. With that said, the department would like to recommend approval of the variance from AMC 2180-300D lot width to depth ratio for the south half of Lot 9 and Lot 10 Northwood Park subdivision, subject to recording a final plat for case S11878-1 within 18 months of its approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and could we hear from the petitioner or the petitioner's representative, please?
My name is Jackie Danner. I'm the owner of the property, and I'm hoping that you will approve my request for a variance. I don't have much to say except that I think it makes sense to approve it. Everybody on that street have the same size lot, and I don't see how else I could move forward with my remodel situation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Danner? Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to testify in case S11878-2 Northwood Park subdivision?
Good evening. My name is Marnie Isaacs. We live on 2418 Forest Park Drive, which is 4 lots to the north of the current property. And I'm here to testify in favor of the plat application. We proposed and the municipality approved the change in the zone in this area from R2 to R2D back in 1980, and this is exactly what we had envisioned, an improvement in the lots and the structures along that section of Forest Park Drive. So I would encourage you to support the application. I did have one question, if I could, to the chair, to the staff. I noticed that there's a recommendation to remove the 100-year floodplain notation on the plat, and I was wondering if they could address that. It's from the June 6th staff notes.
Mr. Whitfield?
Page 13 in the packet.
Madam Chair, I'll answer that question. I did the short plat for this case and compiled the comments. And this was, the reason for that is because the floodplain boundary moves, and so while the setback requirements would still apply to that property, the municipality didn't want to have it marked on there because any permitting would have to be any building permit would have to be reviewed to make sure it wasn't in that setback. but they don't want a line, they did not want a line on the plat indicating that it was a fixed line.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any questions for Ms. Isaacs? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify in case S11878-2, Northwood Park subdivision? Anyone at all? Seeing none, Ms. Danner, would you care to use any of your rebuttal time? You have over 9 minutes. She indicates not. So we'll close the public hearing. Do any of the board members have questions of staff? Seeing none, I would like a positive motion, please. Mr. Story.
In the case S-11878-2, Northwood Park subdivision, I move for the approval of the variance from AMC 21.80.300.D, lot width to depth ratio for the south half, Lot 9 and Lot 10, Northwood Park subdivision, subject to, number 1, recording a final plat for case S-11878-1 within 18 months of its approval.
Thank you. Ms. McKenzie seconds the motion. Mr. Story, would you speak to your motion?
Yes, based on the planning staff analysis and my view that the approval of this variance will move the property closer to conformance with current subdivision regulations, and replatting to remove the interior lot lines will resolve the building setback issue, and the fact that the subdivision was created prior to subdivision regulations and the department recommendations, I move to approve.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to comment? Any other discussion? Mr. Young.
Thank you. Through the chair, I am going to support this motion, and I just wanted to say that I concur with the findings that staff read on page 3 and page 4 of our staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to talk, wishing to speak to this motion, wishing discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the variance is approved. Next case is case S11881-1, Galatea Estate Subdivision. Could we have the staff's presentation, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a 2-acre subdivision of lots 10 through 19, Block 7, Galatea Subdivision, into 20 townhouse lots under the provisions of Anchorage Municipal Code 2145-220. The property is located south of East 64th Avenue between O'Brien Street and Galatea Drive. Currently, the lots are undeveloped. The site is zoned R2M, multiple family residential district. The petition site abuts 2 rights-of-way. East 64th Avenue to the northwest is not constructed to municipal standard, and East 64th directly north of the petition site is an unimproved right-of-way. To the east, O'Brien Street is also an unimproved right-of-way. Private development requires the petitioner to enter into a subdivision agreement for the urban area improvements for East 64th Avenue and O'Brien Street. The petitioner is currently working with private development to develop an improvement to public place agreement for the Galatea Drive improvements from East 64th Avenue to O'Brien Street. Private Development recommends combining the Galatea Drive improvements with the subdivision agreement to create one agreement for the entire site. The non-motorized transportation coordinator is requesting a 10-foot wide paved sidewalk along East 64th Avenue connecting to the existing pedestrian facilities on Lake Otis. This is consistent with the pedestrian plan to connect subdivisions with existing facilities. Public water and sanitary sewer are not currently available to these parcels. A main line extension agreement will be required for water and sanitary service. ACS has requested a 10-foot telecommunication and electrical easement along the south property boundary. I would like to briefly go over the townhouse standards. Townhouse development dimensional standards for the R2M district are as follows. A minimum lot size of 3,500 square feet. Staff finds this standard to be met. Lots shall have a minimum width of 35 feet or 40 feet for corner lots. Staff finds this standard to be met. Required yard setbacks. The townhomes are arranged so as to meet the required front and rear yard setbacks for the R2M district. No side yard setback is required for townhomes that are placed on a common lot line. Staff finds this standard to be met. Lot coverage shall not exceed 35%. Staff finds this to be met. Townhouse development plans and site plan requirements. Structures which shall include at least one single-family car or single-car garage for each townhouse unit. The site plan indicates 10 units with 2-car garages and 10 units with single-car garages. Staff finds this standard to be met. A landscaping plan showing grass, trees, and shrubs for all unpaved areas. Landscaping shall amount to at least 1% of the projected value of each townhouse. A landscaping plan was submitted. The projected value of each townhome is approximately $250,000. A note on the landscape plan states, quote, landscaping shall amount to at least 1% of the projected value of each townhome per AMC 2145-220 C2B, end quote. Staff finds that standard to be met. Driveways of at least 16 feet but not more than 18 feet wide and paved. Staff finds this standard to be met. A drainage plan was in fact submitted with the application, so staff finds that to be met. A soils report was submitted at the time of application. Staff finds that standard to be met. 10-foot wide snow storage easement along the front property line. As indicated in the site plan, there is a 10-foot wide snow storage easement, so staff finds this standard to be met. Preliminary house plans for each townhouse. This was submitted with the application, so staff finds this standard to be met. And a party wall agreement. A party wall agreement was in fact submitted with the application, so staff finds that standard to be met. With that said, the staff would like to recommend approval of the site plan and approval of the plat for 18 months, subject to the conditions listed on pages 9, 10, and 11 of your staff packet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Are there any questions of staff? Mr. Young.
Yes, through the chair. On page 9, item number 2 under approval plat for resolving with watershed management services the need for a stormwater pollution prevention plan, could we modify that to provide a stormwater pollution prevention plan to watershed management for review and approval prior to receiving the subdivision notice to proceed? I asked that question because if this is more than an acre in size and water discharges from this, there's federal and state regulations that require that.
Through the chair, I've got no objection to that request.
Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing, and could we hear from the petitioner, please?
My name is Charles Gregory. I'm president of TCB Incorporated. Let me take just a second to turn this off. I'm sorry. I am Charles Gregory, as I said, president of TCB Incorporated. I have been in Anchorage, Alaska since 1964. I've been a builder and developer since 1974. My first subdivision was in 1974. So I've been at this business for a while in the city. I always have worked pretty well with staff and all the different departments that we have here. Right now, I have acquired a small area of this entire subdivision. It's 167 lots, and I have 34 of them in one area. I started buying these lots in 2001 and just kind of pieced them out together, and now I have all the lots, and it's pretty well separated from other parts of the Galatea subdivision. So I have proposed water and sewer plans within, they say now within 7 days I'll have the approval on that to do the entire subdivision. But as I go here, I'm more conscious of cost more today than I've ever been before. I thought after surviving the late 80s that there would be no time I'd be more conscious of cost. The reason I've put together this townhouse proposal is because in today's market, it's better to have what we'll call a deeded lot that you can transfer to a new buyer, and the financing is better. So that's the whole reasoning that we're coming here. However, it does require water and sewers into each side of the lot and improvements to the street. And so the costs are really close right now to just saying, no, I won't do it. I'll go ahead with having duplex and triplex lots out there. So I only have a few objections to what the staff and primarily planning and management has come up with. They have required that I upgrade 64th Avenue to a 33-foot standard street with curbing and sidewalks. Right now we have what is, I'll call it an approval for strip paving on that area. And the reason we have that is because an old regulation back in anything developed prior to 76 would go under the regulations of those years. So we pretty much have this road approved, but when I do this subdivision, it falls into the newer standards, and so I'm kind of caught with a catch-21 here. They have proposed that I put in the 33-foot road. I don't have any real problem with that. I have a problem with the what I'll call a stand-up curb or a barrier curb that they're requiring on the north side. I don't see any reason to have curb there at all, and as especially as a barrier curb. A barrier curb costs $6 more per foot than a regular rolled curb. However, if we put a curb there at all, it's still very expensive. And like I say, our present plan is to have just strip paving there. The other south side, they're requiring a sidewalk, and I have no problems with that. However, I have a problem with the amount of greenery that they're requiring between the rolled curb on that south side and the sidewalk. They're asking for 7 feet there. That becomes kind of a catch-all that nobody maintains, and I've experienced this in the past. If we could cut that area down to maybe 2 feet, 4 feet, that would be acceptable. And I have no other problems really with the situation. They've asked for a 10-foot paved pathway from the subdivision over to Lake Otis. That seems very excessive. I'm guaranteeing you that if I have to build that, the cars would be going through there. They go around barriers, they go over barriers, they tear down barriers, and they would get to Lake Otis Road. If we could have maybe a a 4-foot pathway. I have no problems with that, and actually had planned to put something there myself, but more of a kind of a nature walk, I call it. And I was going to put it in with some chips that I have several trees there that we're chipping up right now, and I was going to lay down a bed of chips under a good area. It doesn't, it'll soak up the water and your feet won't get dirty and wet. So those 3 items there are the items that I have any concern about. The north barrier curb, on 64th Avenue, the 7-foot greenery, and this pathway over to Lake Otis. That's my biggest concerns, and it may be right on the border of not being able to do this and result back to my original plan of having duplex lots. I think that pretty much wraps me up.
Are there any questions for Mr. Gregory? Mr. Young?
Yes, through the chair. By replacing the paved pathway with wood chips, wouldn't that restrict bicycles and bicycle traffic?
It hasn't in the past. Most bicycles kind of enjoy going on a rough road anyhow. If you see, most of our bicycles up here are kind of trail bikes anyhow. And I'm not talking something that's real rough, chips and things to walk on. It would be a nice path through there.
And through the chair, how would that be maintained so that bicycles could use it also?
I would assume that the city would have that responsibility. I, as a developer, have an obligation for a couple of years to do the things that we work out, to guarantee, to manage, and then we turn everything over to the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gregory? Mr. Fuller?
Yes, through the chair. The path you're talking about, is that going to be in the, I don't see it on the, I'm sure it's someplace in here, but is that going to be in the north 30 feet of the dedicated East 64th?
Actually, they're asking for that path from O'Brien Street to Lake Otis. It's about probably close to 300 feet.
Yeah, but Lot 1A, you don't own that, right?
No, I do not.
So you wouldn't go across Lot 1A, you'd have to go into
No.
that.
There is a 30-foot right-of-way remaining. Now, up on my end and west of O'Brien, there's a 60-foot right-of-way on 64th. But for some reason, they got lost. They lost half of the right-of-way up there. But there's still 30 feet right-of-way into Lake Otis.
And who owns the property on the north side of the road?
That is actually a commercial venture. Several different parties. One of them is Capital Glass. Give you an idea of what's there.
So if you develop the whole road, when they start accessing that road, will they be required to reimburse you any?
They don't have any access to that road at present, even though they have fenced off their area. Their access is from 63rd.
So they're not going to have curb and gutter access over
No.
there at all? Right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gregory? Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
You have 4 minutes left for rebuttal, although I don't think you're going to need it. As there is no one else in the room, I'm assuming that no one else wants to speak. Do you have anything else you'd like to say? Or
No.
Okay. Mr. Gregory indicates not. So we'll close the public hearing, and the matter rests with the board. Could I have a... No. Are there any questions of staff? Ms. Moses.
Through the chair, can you tell me on recommendation number 8, need for a 10-foot wide paved sidewalk to O'Brien Street to the existing pedestrian facilities on Lake Otis, what is the width of the existing pedestrian facility on Lake Otis?
Through the chair, Ms. Moses, I'm unsure of the actual width of the existing pedestrian facilities on Lake Otis. However, I would like to clarify one thing about this particular condition, if you don't mind. This is a resolved condition, and I understand Mr. Gregory's concerns. This is a very lengthy request. I mean, it's 300 feet, and I recognize that. The condition is to resolve the need for a 10-foot wide pedestrian pathway, and this gives the non-motorized transportation coordinator the discretion to either do away with this request once more information is provided to her, reduce the width of the pathway, or whatever she sees fit. So I've really put that in there to get her information out there, but also give her the opportunity to do away with that request. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes, through the chair. Would you mind staff discussing the need for the curb on the north side and versus strip paving, and also, or first curb on the north side as a barrier versus strip paving, and then also the need for a curb on the south side?
Through the chair, Mr. Young, these are the recommendations that came from private development. The barrier curb, the rolled curb on the south side, the 7-foot grassed separation between pathways. And unfortunately, Mr. Kiefer from private development is not with us tonight. So I would like to defer to him if I could, and he's not here to speak to it. So I apologize for that.
Mr. Fuller?
Through the chair, Mr. Fuller, no, there is not. The request was to construct a 10-foot wide paved pathway within the right-of-way out to the existing facilities at Lake Otis. So at this point in time, no, there's not an existing trail. It actually is consistent with the pedestrian plan that says that you must connect pedestrian facilities to existing pedestrian facilities. Correct.
Any other questions for staff? I guess I might have a question. I'm not sure it's even negotiable, but with condition number 6, could we change that? I mean, he would definitely have to enter into a subdivision agreement. But perhaps add another condition, end it with private development, and then add another condition about resolving the form of the required urban area improvements, just to give an added little bit of flexibility, perhaps.
Madam Chair, I would not be opposed to that. I think that's reasonable.
Okay, with that, could I have a positive motion, please? Mr. Young.
In the case of S11881-1 Galactica Estate Subdivision, I make a motion for approval of the site plan subject to number 1, prior to recording the final plat, submitting to the Planning Division a final copy of the party wall agreement.
Is there a second? Ms. Moses seconds. Mr. Young, would you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, I intend to support this motion. The staff has reviewed their findings, and I concur with their findings that it appears the conditions have been met. So I will be supporting this.
Is there any other discussion? Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, then the site plan is approved. Moving on to the plat. Mr. Young.
In the case of S11881-1 Galactica Estate Subdivision, I move for approval of the plat for 18 months. Number 1, resolving utility easements. Number 2, I would like to modify the language that's in here to provide a stormwater pollution prevention plan to watershed management for review and approval prior to receiving a subdivision notice to proceed. Number 3, 4, and 5 as stated. Number 6, I may need some assistance on this, but prior to final plat approval, enter into a subdivision agreement and/or improvement to public place agreement for private development for the required urban area improvements. And then I think at this point, could I modify or add 6A? Would that be appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, at 6A would be resolve the need with private development for paved interior roadways, curb and gutter, sidewalks detached from the roadway by a 7-foot wide green strip, street lighting, drainage facilities, traffic control devices, monuments, landscaping, and utilities for East 64th Avenue and O'Brien Street. And number 7 through 10 on page 10 would stay the same.
Is there a second? Ms. McKenzie seconds. Mr. Young, would you speak to your motion, please?
I intend to support my motion. Thank you. I agree with the staff findings that this appears to have met all of the standards that need to be met. On the modifications I made, number 2, it's my understanding that if water discharges from a property more than 1 acre, it's required to file a stormwater pollution prevention plan and get a construction general permit or an individual permit. And on number 6, there may be an opportunity here not to have the curbs or the 7-foot wide buffers, and rather than substituting our knowledge for staff, let the staff resolve those issues.
Any other discussion? Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the plat is approved for 18 months, subject to the conditions as amended. Okay, the agenda does not indicate any persons to be heard or any reports. Are there any board member comments? Mr. Young.
So I would like to have us reconsider our vote on the summary of action for the Platting Board, summary on July 6, 2011.
What's your concern?
I believe that under the disclosures that, in disclosure A, where it says pass, it should be failed, and under B, C, and D, where it says failed, it should be passed.
So rather than reconsider our vote, you want to correct? I'm sorry.
The motion was to approve all the action, so you would need a motion to rescind the vote, rescind the motion, and then put a new motion in and modify, approve the other two, and then modify the one.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
That way it'll have it all on the record.
Okay.
You want me to
We need a motion to rescind our positive vote for the entire summary of action part. Approval of action summaries. So we need to, Mr. Young moves and Mr. Cole seconds. Is there any objection to the motion? Okay, seeing none, the motion passes, and we're back to approval of action summaries. So I suppose I should ask if there's any corrections when I ask for a positive motion. Okay, which I didn't. Okay. Approval of action summaries. We have action summaries for Monday, June 27th, 2011, Monday, July 4th, 2011, and Wednesday, July 6th, 2011. Are there any corrections? Mr. Young.
Yes, through the chair. On the summary of action for July 6, 2011, I would like to change under C's special order of business disclosures. Under A, on the first line where it says a motion directing Mr. Young to participate passed, I would like to change that to failed. Also, under item B, on the first line, a motion directing Mr. Young to participate failed, I would like to change that to passed. On item C, a motion directing Mr. Young to participate failed, I would like to change that to passed. Under item D, first line, a motion directing Mr. Young to participate failed. I would like to change that to passed.
Thank you. Are there any other corrections? Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes and the action summaries are approved as amended. Any other board member comments? I have a question of staff. It's August, and I know that terms come up in October, I believe. So now would be the time for anyone who wishes to continue to apply. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, you are correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And I'm one of the ones that's going to rotate off. So I will be, and Ms. Taylor and Mr. Story This is my third consecutive term of a two-term limit, so I doubt that I will be reappointed, that I could be reappointed, that I should be reappointed. Mr. Story, are you going to re-up, or?
Yes, and I actually got a phone call.
Oh, very good. Ms. Taylor? Okay. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Mr. Young, is there a second? We are adjourned.